Welcome, ladies and gents. Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxing on Twitter for boxing-related tweets. Let's talk boxing. Let's talk George Groves. He's retired at the age of 30, still among the premier super middleweights in the world. It was a very, very good fight against Callum Smith. I personally had him ahead at the time of the stoppage, but Smith was certainly wearing him down. But he was still showed that he could hang with the best. He got to the final of the World Boxing Super Series. There was talk of him potentially fighting James DeGale if James DeGale does indeed come through Chris Eubank. So there were big fights out there for him. So it's come as a bit of a shock to me, even though a lot of people were talking about the possibility of this fight happening. And it's a variety of people have given their public opinions on this, and it's caused a public spat, notably between Andre Ward and Carl Froch. If you haven't seen it, you can head over to Twitter, but we're going to talk about it right here and relay some of the tweets. So firstly, Carl Froch has given a bunch of interviews. Boxing Scene quoted him as saying, I won't miss George Groves. In fact, let me read it to you. I won't miss him, and I'm not sure that British boxing will miss him, these days at least. There was nothing left for him out there. That's certainly not true. There are certainly a whole bunch of fights out there for Groves if he wanted to take them. Big money fights, pay-per-view fights. Whatever the case may be, Andre Ward, who doesn't seem to like Carl Froch very much, Carl Froch, of course, seems very bitter towards Andre Ward, decided to pipe up and say, this dude is the biggest hater. You're over 40, let it go. The arrogance is off the charts. And then he went on to say, George Groves, congrats on a great career, champ. Glad you got to go out on your own terms. Bless you, man. Very, very classy message from Andre Ward there. And he was, wishing a fellow competitor who had actually said in the past he wanted to fight Andre Ward. He wished him the best and showed a great amount of respect. A champion showing a champion respect. Froch didn't seem to want to take it that way, ever. The fact that, according to Carl Froch, Groves had the audacity as a young man to question him as being the best in the world and feeling that he could possibly stand up to him was somehow seen as a sign of disrespect. The fact that Froch did that same thing to Calzaghe, it doesn't seem to matter to Carl Froch, but the fact that Groves had the front to do that seems to have affected Carl Froch an awful lot. Whatever the case may be, it's something that's clearly he's still angry about, despite the fact that he's beaten him twice. And I think it's the method of the two victories, to be honest with you. The first one in particular was very controversial. The majority of people, if Froch won that fight, it was Groves that won the hearts and minds of the people. Okay, he won the bigger picture, so to speak. And so they had that rematch in front of 80,000, as Froch always reminds him. And even after this retirement, in another interview, he spoke about the fact that, he said, he's a terrific fighter with a lot of power, but, I was able to lay him out in front of 80,000 people. So he's still digging there, and he's always bringing that 80,000 people into the equation. And yeah, he's basically always sort of digging at Groves. He doesn't seem to like Groves. Now, he didn't like what Andre Ward said to him either. The fact that he referred to him as a hater, and Carl Froch piped up and said, can you remind everyone of why you retired again? And there's another tweet he put out, which I can't seem to see here. I'm not sure if he's deleted it. But after he put, can you remind everyone why you retired again? And he put a sleepy face emoji. He then wrote to someone else's tweet, it was something along the lines of, because you couldn't get yourself a TV fight. In other words, you're so boring, you're so dull, you couldn't get yourself a fight. And Andre Ward replied to that, and he said, you still mad, bro? Shake my head. Old and bitter, just old and bitter. And stop blocking all the fans that don't agree with you. Stop it. You're too old for that too. So Andre Ward is taking the mature moral high ground here, and he's mocking Carl Froch, really. And it seemed to have struck some sort of chord, because 3 hours later, Carl Froch put out a tweet to directly address George Groves. And it said, where is it? Let me find it for you here. Come on, where is this? One sec, I'm going to pause this. And the tweet said, if you've never boxed, you will never understand the profound respect between two fighters, even if they don't like each other. At St. George Groves, I wish you a healthy and happy retirement. You was a solid world champion, and you did yourself and your family very proud. Take care, champ. Very, very different trajectory of his message, isn't it? Very different method of talking about Groves. I don't know if a PR team's been behind him. They said, Carl, you need to sort this out. I don't know if he's been embarrassed. Now, one thing I will say is that a lot of people have referred to Carl Froch as being a bit arrogant, a bit of a narcissist. I'm going to leave that to you guys to judge. Adam Booth has in the past said that a lot of fighters in the sport of boxing are narcissists. It's all about themselves. They have to think like that. They have to be quite arrogant to get to the top. But a lot of them, it can harm them because they can't take criticism particularly well, and that they don't actually feel, psychologists will tell you that they don't actually feel guilt in the same way as the majority of the public. So if you were to say something bad about someone, you might then feel guilty and want to rectify it. A narcissist, psychologists would argue, and you can find the difference, say, between a psychologist and a psychopath on YouTube. You can Google it and you'll see psychologists speaking about it. A narcissist will say something bad, and if no one hears or it's not sort of outed or anything, they won't feel guilt. But if it's outed and people start to say, you're bang out of order, I can't believe you said that, because their own image has been affected, they begin to feel shame. And it's that shame that forces them to then reconsider their actions. Now, someone who was arguing, and I'm not arguing this, I don't know Carl Froch on a personal level, I've never met the man, I have no idea whether this is all a persona or what, I have no idea. But one would argue that if he was a narcissist, this would be quite a typical trait of that, because there was a media, or certainly a public backlash that has been sort of spoken about in the media with regards to Carl Froch's approach towards George Groves' retirement. So if he feels a bit ashamed from that and he's decided to try and rectify it, then clearly Andre Ward's gotten under his skin. Now, whatever the case might be, let's talk about, or between those two, let's talk about the reality of George Groves' legacy and what he achieved in the sport of boxing. Is it true that the sport of boxing won't miss him? Well, we've already spoken about the big fights that were out there. Personally, as a fight fan, there are very few fighters out there that have entertained me as much as George Groves has in his career. He's going to go down in my lifetime, at least, since I've been watching boxing growing up, because he turned professional 11 years ago. So, in this period of time when he started fighting in 2008, he's provided me with more entertainment than most fighters out there. How can British fight fans forget that brilliant build-up and that brilliant fight to beat James DeGale by majority decision? What a fantastic affair that was. What a fantastic saga that was. He then stopped Paul Smith, a very good fighter who went on to fight Andre Ward later in his career. He stopped him inside 2 rounds. But one of the beautiful things about Groves is that he always looked vulnerable. There were various fighters who, even early in his career, they would catch him. I think it was Kenny Anderson who he stopped inside 6 rounds. I think he hurt Groves, if I'm not mistaken. I think he hurt Groves at one point. And there were many cases like that where Groves seemed to have been a little bit hurt and then came through it. And so because of that vulnerability, by the time came around when he was going to, by the time the fight came around for him to fight Carl Froch in the first time, it appeared as though people didn't give him much hope. He was a massive outsider, and in the very first round, he takes the fight to Carl Froch and drops him. What a moment. There have been very few... I mean, listen, there have been some amazing moments in the sport of boxing, okay, where it's that thing where you're just watching the fight and you're like, oh, you're up on your feet, you can't believe what you just saw, like, oh my... That was one of the moments for me. I did not expect George Groves to affect Carl Froch like that at such an early stage of the fight in particular. And I'm not on the fence about this. I firmly believe that the stoppage was far too premature. I believe that Carl Froch buzzed him. I feel that Groves was tired, but I don't think he was particularly hurt. I think he was tired. I think he would have survived, and I think he would have gone on to get a second wind. And it's TKO in the 9th round. I believe he would have survived that round. There was only 90 seconds left. And then I believe he would have gone on to win the fight. So I don't sit on the fence about that. But he got his opportunity at a rematch. And George Groves seemed to be in control. And it was this huge affair now. It was at Wembley Stadium, 80,000 people, as I'm sure you're all aware. And George Groves, despite what the scorecards were saying, seemed to be in complete control for me. He looked very, very good. He was on top in terms of controlling the tempo. His jab looked rangy. He hurt Carl Froch on a couple of occasions. He was winning the fight. And then he made a stupid error, which he didn't actually learn from immediately, because he went on to make the same error later on against Badu Jack. So we're going to talk about that. But he threw... Carl Froch got him up against the ropes, not forced him on the ropes, cut the ring off, and George Groves seemed to go back towards the ropes. And Carl Froch lined him up with a right hand, and he threw a throwaway left hook. And prior to the fight, George Groves, trying to play his mind games, was saying, I'm going to knock Carl Froch out with a left hook. So he throws a throwaway left hook, Froch does, and then his head's now lined up with the right hand, and he throws a right hand down the pipe. Very straight, very powerful. George Groves tries to counter a straight right hand down the pipe with a wide left hook without exiting the center line. He didn't move his head from the center line. Suicidal. A right hand is always going to land more quickly a straight right cross than a left hook because it has less of a trajectory to travel, and you're trying to counter. So there's a split second by which Carl Froch has released that missile before you've even released yours. It's never landing first. And if you're exiting the centre line, that's fine. Because if you're throwing the left hook and checking out, and you're moving, that right hand can skim straight past your face. It misses you. You've caught him with the left hand. Or if you're going to dip and throw that left hook, again, you're exiting that centre line. But to stay in the middle and throw that wide left hook, suicidal. And he didn't learn from it. Because after that devastating loss, really, he fought Christopher Abrace in an unconvincing win, to be honest. He obviously had a lot of rust and mental baggage. He then beat Dennis Duglin, and then he fought Badou Jack. And Badou Jack was another fighter who was very, very underrated. A fantastic fighter Badou Jack was. And the majority of people felt that Groves could do enough. He could go over there and do enough to win the fight. And he comes out, and in the very first round, he makes the same stupid error. He doesn't exit the centre line, and he tries to throw a left hook. He's caught on the top of the head, and he goes down. And he lost the fight by split decision. Now, if he doesn't get dropped, if I'm not mistaken, he gets a result. I'm not sure if it's a draw or if he gets... I can't remember exactly what the scorecards were. On my card, I had Badou Jack winning the fight by 1 point. So I would have had it, I believe, a draw or 1 round. Was it 1 round or 1 point? There is a difference when you're considering a knockdown, of course. Either way, so I can't remember if I had even rounds. I don't remember what it was, but I remember having Badou Jack marginally ahead. But I remember the knockdown playing a big role. And it seemed to be that there was nowhere left for him to go. He left the ring crying. He seemed to blame an awful lot on Paddy Fitzpatrick, which goes back to the question mark of narcissistic fighters in the sport of boxing. Again, I'm not making any accusations here, but many fighters seem to have this inability to accept personal blame, and they always want to find someone else to blame it on, and he seemed to blame it on him very, very publicly. And Fitzpatrick's always conducted himself with class when it comes to that. Fitzpatrick was there for him when no one else was. When he lost this relationship with Adam Booth. Now, I've heard a whole bunch of rumours online and through random fans about why he fell out with Adam Booth. I heard that there was a financial disagreement. I can't remember what Hatman heard. Hatman heard something else, and he put it up on a video. I'd read on a forum that it was something to do with buying property. Adam Booth advised him to buy property or something in northern Cyprus, which is an illegal state. It's not the Republic of Cyprus. It's an illegal state which isn't recognized by the UN. So he invested money in a nation whereby you're buying money which was built sort of on stolen land, essentially, after an invasion. So like any stolen property, if you're investing in it, it doesn't have value. If the authorities catch you, they're going to confiscate it. So he apparently lost a lot of money. Again, I have no idea if there's any truth to that whatsoever. I saw it once on a boxing forum. I have no idea what they fell out about. Whatever the case may be, he was left in the lurch at the last minute. I also read a rumor that it was something to do with the trainer's cut, that Adam Booth wanted more than 10% or something. Like I said, I don't know. But whatever it was, they fell out, and Paddy Fitzpatrick was there for him. And he seemed to turn his back on him. And it was a very acrimonious break, and I just thought that mentally he was done. But no, he got with Shane McGuigan. He developed that jab even further, that beautiful jab that he's got, and he went on a run, beating De Luisa, Brophy, Murray, Goodnecht, who was a tragic victory, of course, because he really hurt Eduard Goodnecht. And then finally he got his world title shot against Chudinov. He started off quite poorly. I thought he couldn't evade that very sneaky straight jab from Chudinov, but he eventually put his foot on the gas, went to war, and achieved his dreams at the fourth time of asking. And then after that, he beat Jamie Cox and Chris Eubank Jr. These are all fights that we tipped for him to win, by the way. So you'd have made a lot of money with us at the time if you're following us at the time. But George Groves was a terrific fighter, and then came the final of the Super Series. I thought he'd win that. He didn't win it in the end. I think size played a big role in that. I actually thought he was ahead on points at the time, but that Callum Smith has really taken his toll in terms of size, and it affected Groves. And now he's obviously decided that enough's enough. I've achieved all my dreams. The thing is, there are two ways to look at this. In terms of boxing and legacy, he's underachieved. Because in my opinion, he should have beaten Carl Froch twice. The first time, okay, like I said, it's controversial. The second time, I felt like he was in control. He made a very stupid error. So that potentially could have read that he had, up until those 21 fights, he could have been 21-0. He could have been 23-0 after beating Rebresse and Duglin before going on to fight Badou Jack, okay? But instead, it read 21-2 after 23 fights. And I just felt that he underachieved in that regard. And then he fought Badou Jack. Now, Badou Jack's underrated, like I said, but a 50-50 fight, which could have ended up as a draw because he made that same error. He ended up having another loss on his record. He finally started to have that Indian summer in his career, you know. Martin Murray, Chudinoff, Jamie Cox, Chris Eubank, they're all very, very good wins. And he started to show, you know, the talent that this guy had. He was very, very rangy, a fantastic jab. Distance control was excellent. His feet were brilliant. His movement was very good. He developed great body punching under Shane McGuigan. Personally, I actually thought he was a better fighter under Shane McGuigan than he was against Adam Booth. With Adam Booth, I felt that he was a little bit, although he moved around the ring brilliantly with Adam Booth, he was also younger. You have to take that into consideration. But he was a little bit vulnerable inside the pocket. I thought he could get hit. Whereas he held a much higher guard and made his body smaller by tucking forward, and he would counter you with vicious body shots. And Jamie Cox knows all about that. Chris Eubank felt a bunch of big shots. So I felt that he actually progressed very, very well against very, very well under the tutelage of Shane McGuigan, and then he lost to Callum Smith and has decided to ride off into the sunset. So from a boxing perspective, one could argue that although he's achieved everything that a fighter dreams of, pay-per-view star, world champion, in big domestic and international clashes, he's fought in the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, he's fought at Wembley Stadium in London, he's achieved it all, he's a millionaire, he's made a lot of money. Despite all of that, he's actually achieved less than I believe he could have in the sport of boxing. Having said that, if he's underachieved in the actual competitive aspect of the sport, in terms of the storyline itself, it's quite a romantic success story. Like I said, he's made something of himself. He's getting out under his own terms with his health intact. God willing, it stays that way. And he's graced us all with wonderful boxing memories. And personally, I'm really going to miss George Groves. I thought he was a terrific addition to the sport. And you know, I hope James DeGale takes a page out of his own book on whatever happens after this Eubank fight. Now that the Groves fight isn't available, whether he wins, loses, or draws, I hope he walks away from the sport too, because I don't know, I find that he's been slurring his words a little bit, sounding a bit nasally. He looks like he's been declining physically. Let me know what you think. How will you remember George Groves? Do you think he's underachieved? Or do you think he's overachieved? Or do you think it's just about right? What do you make of Carl Froch's remarks? You know, is this just a case of a spiteful man who got the better of him and is going to rub it in his face for the rest of his life? Is he a narcissist, in your opinion? You know, do you think that the only reason he then congratulated Groves after spending all this time trolling him and criticizing him is because it got put